My name is Wally Sarkisian with the writer, journalist, publisher Harut Sassounian. After this. Okay. Harut, welcome.
Thank you, Wally. Always a pleasure.
Pashinyan have secured, he put this iron gate around himself. He spent millions of dollars creating security apparatus, bought all this millions of dollars of armored vehicles to protect himself and his thugs. And now that he's secure and also probably has guarantee from Azerbaijan and Aliyev and Erdogan, so he's spewing out now everything without fear, without anything. And so his true color is coming out. And so you watched his speech, so most of us did. So we want to see your input, Pashinyan paper speech. And he's afraid even to face the journalist live, so he does it on paper. So you have to send him your questionnaire and he decide which one to answer or not. So the floor is yours.
Yes, you are correct. Pashinyan has been doing repeated Facebook press conferences with no journalists present, except one lady just reading selective questions from journalists.
Yeah.
So journalists don't have an option to challenge him or ask follow-up questions to his constantly evasive answers.
Do you know who was that lady?
Yes, that lady was from the Armenian public television, Hamek, it's Armenian state television.
Okay. Because I thought it was his secretary.
No, very biased towards the Pashinyan because it's subsidized by the state, the station.
Okay.
It's called the Hamek in Armenian.
Okay.
Well, let's start. Let me warn the viewers that it won't be easy to cover Pashinyan's 2 hours and 17 minutes conversation, but I've taken some notes, so excuse me if I refer to some of the notes to remember all the various things he talked about. Let me start with the independence of Artsakh. Obviously, he has a serious problem with the concept of independent Artsakh. He, in so many different words, so many different ways, he tries to hide that he's not opposed to it. But there are a couple of facts that anybody can agree with, which is since November 2021, that's over a year, he has not once dared to visit Artsakh. That's probably under the orders of Aliyev, Erdogan, and maybe even Putin.
Yeah.
It's shameful that the prime minister of Armenia, who went to Artsakh several times before the war, all of a sudden he stopped going. And if it was a live press conference, there was one question I would have asked him, and God knows what he would have answered. But nobody asked that question in the last couple of his so-called press conferences.
But also, to just stop you there for a second, do you know all his speech, all his return, he never used the word Artsakh. It was all he's talking about mountainous Karabakh. Not a single time he said Artsakh.
Well, that's very unfortunate since about 10 years ago or so, the government of Artsakh officially changed its name to the Republic of Artsakh. So it's no longer Nagorno Karabakh, which is a very unfortunate name Armenians were using, and some Armenians still use, like the Prime Minister, because Nagorno is a Russian word for mountainous, and Karabakh is Turkish word for black garden. And how can Armenians claim that this territory is historically Armenian if the name is Russian and Turkish, which came much later. Years ago, it was Artsakh, centuries ago, and it's been Armenian for a long period in history. Anyway, before I go on in rebutting a lot of his claims and answers, already today there were two major and very important statements issued in response to Pashinyan's press conference. One was the joint public statement, quite long joint public statement by the ombudsman of both Armenia and Artsakh simultaneously.
Correct.
And they used very harsh language, deservedly so. And in a nutshell, they called Pashinyan's statements dangerous to the people of Artsakh, which is very accurate. And as far as I remember, this is the first time that the two ombudsmen issued a joint statement together. I don't think this happened before, but they figured it's so critical that they have to put both of their names on that statement.
Yeah.
That's one important issue which I urge our viewers to read the whole text. It's a very long text.
Yeah, we published that one.
Okay, you can read on gagrule.net. The second important statement was issued by the president of Artsakh, Harut Sassounian. It was surprising in two aspects. The first is that Harut Sassounian usually is quiet. He doesn't dare to say anything contrary to Pashinyan. He tries to cover up for Pashinyan. So when he speaks out and criticizes Pashinyan publicly as an official statement by the president, it says a lot about how wrong Pashinyan was in his statements about Artsakh, about especially his comments about Artsakh's independence, Artsakh Armenians. Every time there was a question about Artsakh being independent or Armenian, he kept bringing up, strangely, the rights of Azeris who used to live in Artsakh. And I mean, we don't really need an enemy. We don't need Aliyev or Erdogan. Already the Prime Minister of Armenia, Pashinyan, is defending the rights of Azeris.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to, and he didn't need to, but this is not the first time he's doing this. He's done this many times. He's called Sushi and is sad and
yeah, I have that. I could run it for a minute.
Sad and dreary town, Sushi, and he said that Artsakh was inhabited by majority Azeris. Of course, after there was 95% Armenian back in the early part of the 20th century, and then the Azeris did ethnic cleansing and got rid of a lot of the Armenians, and the numbers went down. But even at the end, we still had majority of Armenians in Artsakh, not Azeris. But Harut Sassounian, coming back to him, he surprisingly he spoke out and criticized Pashinyan, and it's something he doesn't do. And he himself is not an angel himself, and his decisions leave a lot to be desired in terms of defending the rights of Artsakh. But Pashinyan's comments were so wrong that Harut Sassounian was compelled to go public and make a public statement, and quite strong statement, I must say, and which immediately caught Pashinyan's eye. And Pashinyan in his Facebook today responded to Harut Sassounian, saying that it was misunderstanding and it was uncalled for and things like this. But his answers were very wishy-washy, as they always are, and he didn't dare to really come up and say something pro-Armenian, pro-Artsakh, and something nationalistic, which he never does. And to give you tomorrow's news today, the Parliament of Artsakh is going to have a special extraordinary meeting on Monday, and they're going to issue a statement of their own. They didn't say what it is, but I assume they're gonna counter Pashinyan as the parliament of Artsakh, which is important to go on record. I'm sure all of this Arek Harutunian statement, present statement, the tomorrow's parliament statement are gonna upset Aliyev and Erdogan and probably Putin, but we've heard enough of them saying upsetting things to us. It's time that somebody answers them, and if we've noticed, Aliyev constantly is making threat. He made another threat, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, again saying they will Armenia will end up no good if they stand against Azerbaijan. So, and he's called Yerevan in Azeri city, like Sevan, Azeri, Zankezur, and Sunik. Everything is Azeri. The whole Republic of Armenia is Azeri, according to him, which is ridiculous because Azerbaijan didn't exist until last century. There was no Azerbaijan, and important thing for us to realize is that Pashinyan has never answered any of Aliyev's threats or anti-Armenian or hateful statements against Armenia. Has never answered. He's very quick, on the other hand, in answering very harshly to any Armenian who criticizes him. He is very strong, very harsh, very sarcastic in his parliament appearances. But when Azerbaijan
when he said with Azeri, he's like a pussycat. Look at his face. Look at this face. How he's pussycat.
Yeah, he's just sitting there, not knowing what to say and what to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, so those are the new developments since the press conference. But going back to the press conference, as I said, there's a lot in there to counter because he spoke for 2 hours and 17 minutes, and we don't have that much time. So I have to be very quick I prepared a summary of comments. So I'm gonna look at my summary so that I can cover a lot of territory. There was a question about returning the 2 Azeri prisoners of war that Armenia captured a couple of weeks ago. And the question was, why did you return the Azeri prisoners without asking for the Armenian prisoners in return? After all, Armenian prisoners have been there for over a year now. And contrary to the November 9, 2020 statement saying that all prisoners have to be exchanged by the two sides, Armenia right away, foolishly, as usual, right away gave up all of the Azeri prisoners without at the same time getting all the Armenian prisoners. And so in response to this question of why did you give the Azeri prisoners just like that without asking anything in return, he shocked us by saying, no, we do not want to turn prisoners into bargaining chip. We don't want to ask anything in return.
Yeah, Mother Teresa.
He probably forgot that all along for the past 12 months, every time Azeris released a few Armenian prisoners, Pashinyan went out of his way to release 50,000, 25,000 landmine maps.
Yeah.
So that's a bargaining in return, and now he's saying he doesn't want to bargain. Basically, the bottom line of the whole situation, all the answers I'm giving and all his answers he gave in press conference were that this guy is really incompetent to run a country. He can't even run a little shop, let alone a country with so many problems.
Yeah,
so
look at here. They came from the street. Look at these faces. They came from the street, and now they are the government. Imagine this. This is the problem.
Right. He's incompetent, and he appoints incompetent people like him.
Yeah.
and so that's why we're in the hole that we're in as a nation.
Yeah.
Uh, the since I mentioned the November 9 statement, there were two important problems with that statement that Pashinyan signed on his own without consulting anybody. No foreign minister, no president, no constitutional court, no, not even his beloved members of parliament who are his people.
Yeah.
He just single-handedly signed it, and he made two major mistakes in there. One was that on every item other than prisoners of war, there's a deadline of when that exchange should take place. Like Armenia should give up this land or that land, Harut and Kelbajar, etc., on such and such date, November 15, November 30. But when it comes to prisoners, there's no deadline whatsoever. It's open-ended. So Algerians hang on to them for years if they want to. The second big mistake that Pashinyan made in his November 9 statement is that he signed to give away Artsakh territories that he has no right to. Artsakh doesn't belong to Armenia. He's not the president or prime minister of Artsakh. He has no right to speak on behalf of Artsakh. In fact, before the war, he himself acknowledged that he said, I'm not from Artsakh. I have no right to speak for Artsakh. Artsakh representatives should be in the negotiations with Azerbaijan, with us, because I cannot speak for them. They have to speak for themselves, which was the right thing to say. But as always, he constantly contradicts himself every other day, or sometimes in the same day, twice he contradicts himself. So again, he contradicted by giving up. And which reminds me that in today's statement by the president of Artsakh, Harut Sassounian, he said the fate of Artsakh should be decided by Artsakh people and its government, not by others, meaning not Pashinyan has no right to give up Artsakh and territories. So that's about the prisoners of war. Then he was asked a question about this recent conversation that's heating up about Armenia and Turkey negotiations over opening the border with Turkey, something we've seen that a few times before in previous regimes, which never succeeded, and hope to God that again it will not succeed, but you never know what Pashinyan will concede to Turkey to make it happen. So on the screen is a picture of Rupen Rupenyan, who's a 31-year-old inexperienced man, and he is the deputy speaker of parliament from the Pashinyan's party. And when Pashinyan was asked, why did you appoint him, whereas the counterpart of Turkey at the negotiation is Serdar Kilic, who's a lifelong, experienced, very shrewd Turkish diplomat. He was Turkish ambassador in Washington and Lebanon and other places. He worked in very high-ranking positions in Turkey for years. So I always compare the two meeting like a wolf sitting in front of sheep, a lamb, and it's very clear what the outcome will be. The wolf is going to devour the sheep. There's no contest. This guy knows nothing, and he was assigned to the most important, most critical, sensitive position to represent Armenia. Every time Pashinyan was asked, and others in his party were asked in recent days, why did Pashinyan appoint an inexperienced man? And again, shockingly, the answer was that well, more important than experience is that he is Pashinyan's party guy, so it's important that he negotiates from that point of view. Well, what is he going to negotiate if he doesn't know anything?
Loyalty.
Yeah, I mean, and Pashinyan said the same thing. He said Rupen Rupenyan has a vast experience, he said, and it's important that he's from my party. Well, again, he contradicts himself, because when he was first appointed prime minister, I remember very clearly, he said that I'm going to ignore all kind of affiliations with different parties. I'm going to pick the most experienced person for ministerial posts. And then he went ahead after initially appointing ministers from different parties for a couple of weeks, and then he fired them all and appointed his people, and just about all of them are very incompetent people. Some of them he has changed repeatedly, like the foreign minister. This is the third one, and he also is inexperienced. He appointed an inexperienced Lilith Maguns to be ambassador to the U.S., the most important capital in the world, the United States. You know, even the most ignorant countries, when the time comes to appoint one of their ambassadors to Washington, they select from whatever they have the most competent, experienced diplomat to send to Washington, because it's very critical, and especially critical now because we're in very bad shape after the war, the disastrous war. So we need a very competent ambassador who will meet and negotiate with top-notch U.S. officials. And we're lucky that Trump is gone, who didn't give a damn about Armenia. Biden is a lifelong friend of Armenians, even though he hasn't done everything that we expect. At least he recognizes genocide. But we needed a competent Armenian diplomat to get the results that Armenia needs. And even worse is, we did have a competent ambassador, and Pashinyan recalled the competent ambassador in the middle of his term, and replaced him by this incompetent ambassador that we have now, who has hardly had any meetings, any discussions with anybody. But it's really not his fault. It's the fault of the person who appoints her. It's the prime minister. And again, when asked to comment on the appointments, including the ambassador to Washington, the foreign minister, the envoy to the Turkey-Armenia negotiation, he kept saying, well, no, it's important that these people belong to my party. So he's putting the party above the interests of the nation. So his party's interests come first, and the nation comes second or 100th.
Actually, you said that this conference, it was not for entire Armenian people to see. The conference was directed to his supporters, because people starting to jump the ship. So this, if you really watched it carefully, which I did, it's more to keep his cult within that direction. He's worried now. That's the reason. Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, also to add to what you said, some people say that this press conference was not directed to Armenian people, it was directed to Aliyev and Erdogan.
Yeah.
He said a lot of things that pleases them, so they can rest knowing that they're in comfortable, good hands.
Yeah.
That Pashinyan will continue the concessions and give you more land, more rights, and not stand up for them.
I think you're right.
The other thing which is linked to this subject is what happened recently with the mayor of Yerevan. The mayor of Yerevan was a guy who was very close to Pashinyan. He walked with him. He was on the podium in the square talking to a large crowd of people 2.5 years ago. And all of a sudden, we discover that the guy was so angry at Pashinyan and his party and the defeat in the war that he quietly resigned from Pashinyan's party. But he was kind enough not to announce publicly, and he told them, I don't want to embarrass the prime minister. I will not announce publicly that I resign from the party. So just keep it to yourself, and I'll keep it to myself. And then A year later, all of a sudden, we started hearing rumors that Pashinyan is going to replace him, that his people in the city council or majority uh, councilmen are going to recall him, vote against him. They met with Pashinyan and he agreed to that step. And then they replaced him uh, with his deputy speaker, which is somebody who's aligned with Pashinyan. Now, when at this press conference, when Pashinyan was asked, why did you get rid of the mayor of Yerevan, who in general was doing a lot of good stuff, bringing new buses, taking care of the city, stopping corruption by Pashinyan's people, and they're the ones supposed to fight against corruption by former leaders, but they were more corrupt than the former ones. And Pashinyan, and during his farewell speech of the mayor of Yerevan, he did mention all the corruption. He said, I got a lot of phone calls from Pashinyan's circle asking for favors, asking for special arrangements for lands, buildings, and that now should be investigated by the courts to hold all these people accountable who were trying to engage in corruption. Now, the last point on the mayor is that, once again, Pashinyan contradicted himself when he said, well, this guy, the mayor, left my party, so he can no longer be mayor because we want to carry out the party's platform, the promises. Well, that's very interesting to say and sounds good, sort of, but how does he explain, and no one asked him, how does he explain that he replaced the mayor of Yerevan for not being a party member with the deputy mayor, who's also not a member of his party? So after he goes around saying how important it is that the mayor be a member of his party to carry out the party's platform, he ends up replacing the mayor with a new guy who's also not a party member. It's just total incompetence and total nonsense as usual.
Yep. I always point to this picture. Street protesters become the government. This is what happened. Armenians picked those idiots to run their country. Now, this is your government, Armenia. Idiots. Total idiots.
Right. I recognize some of them were ministers in his government. Harut Sassounian, they're unrelated to the president of Artsakh with the same name. He's the chief of staff of the prime minister. He's also changed several chiefs of staff. He's changed several deputy ministers, and regularly we hear news of this or that high-ranking official getting arrested for bribery, attempted bribery, corruption. But those are people that Pashinyan himself has appointed, not from former government.
Even Minister of Defense, he pointed out. Now he's in jail.
He's sitting in jail, for corruption. Then Pashinyan spent a long time trying to look good in front of the public, of trying to cover up why he lost the wars in such a disastrous way, and in order to deviate the attention of the public from his disastrous defeats, he spent a lot of time, a big chunk of time, talking about all the negotiations by the previous leaders. And he said a whole bunch of things that are not factual. And I read that, I think tomorrow President Kocharian is going to give a press conference live with journalists sitting there. And he's going to respond to probably Pashinyan's made-up stories about the previous negotiations, because the previous negotiations, we'll come to it in a second, but regardless of what they were, they never resulted in losing Artsakh territory and losing 5,000 soldiers. And Pashinyan himself, when he came to power, he dismissed the previous negotiations, which was ongoing, and Aliyev was part of it, and the Minsk group was part of it. and everybody was getting together and coming up with different uh, points and arguments about how they're going to settle. So Pashinyan, all of a sudden, he comes to power and puts a full stop to this process of negotiation, and proudly announced, he said, I will start the negotiations from the point of zero.
Yeah, yeah, he said
When
that.
he said that repeatedly, and when Aliyev heard that, and Aliyev mentioned this himself, he said, when I heard Pashinyan says point of zero, and we spent 30 years negotiating and making slow, very slow and difficult progress, and this guy says, no, it's all out in the garbage can. We're going to start from zero. Uh, Aliyev thought, well, I guess the only option left is the war. Because either you sit at the negotiating table or you have a war. You fight or talk. And when the talking stops, the fighting starts. That's what happened. Pashinyan also said that after 2016, April 2016, when the Azeris attacked the east of Armenia for 4 days, I'm sorry, not east of Armenia, the east of Artsakh, for 4 days, the 4-day battle. He said that the documents reflected that negotiations will be turned over to the UN Security Council. I don't have those documents in front of me. I don't know if they're public, but I'm sure somebody's going to make them public if they're not very soon, like Kocharian tomorrow probably. I don't recall that that Armenia agreed to have Security Council in charge of the negotiation, because Armenian leaders for 30 years, they've said it hundreds of times that the Minsk group is in charge of the negotiations, not the UN. In fact, I remember when there was a UN General Assembly vote on Artsakh, the 3 Minsk group ambassadors, Russian, French, and US, they either did not vote or they voted against the resolution, saying that this isn't the business of the UN, this is the business of us, the Minsk group. So I don't know about that, but anyway, Pashinyan said a whole bunch of things about previous documents, and God knows if any of the things he said is a fact or not. Okay, cover that. Then he came up with a very strange argument. He said, people are blaming me for losing the war. And again, contradicting himself, because after the war, when he appeared in parliament, he said, yes, I'm responsible for the loss of the war. But now he's changed his mind that he's not responsible. He said, people are blaming me for losing the war. But he said, if I had returned the territories to avoid the war, then they would have blamed me for returning the land. So the only thing that they can blame me is not returning the territories and starting the war, which is very strange logic.
You know, Harut, one thing here, sorry to stop you. I'm wondering what those 4,000 people who their children died, when they look this picture, he's sitting having tea, coffee, whatever, with this guy in private. Can you imagine what those families think about it? You know, imagine this.
I hate to think about the families, because the families have gone through hell. They're still going through hell. A lot of families, they don't know if their sons are still alive or not. There are a lot of missing bodies. A lot of families, they suspect that maybe if they're alive, they're in prison in Baku, and they're getting tortured constantly by this barbarian Azeri government. So they're going through hell. And Pashinyan keeps pouring fire on the oil regularly. I remember before the June 20 elections, when he was being criticized during the campaign for not being able to return the prisoners after 8 months, all of a sudden, again, Pashinyan comes up with a completely crazy statement that says, I'm sure our prisoners in Baku will understand and they'll be more than happy to wait in prison another couple of months.
Yeah,
until
yeah.
I
He said
release
that.
them." I mean, who in his right mind is going to be happy after being 8 months tortured in Azeri jail? He's going to wait a couple months. And now, even worse than that, several more months have passed, another 6, 7 months have passed, they're still in prison. And God knows when they're going to be freed. They may not be freed for a long time. And Azerbaijan has sentenced many of them to long jail terms, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So I don't know what's going to happen. And the families are going crazy with this nonsense. It's very tragic. Of course, we should also mention here that in mid-October, in the middle of the war, when Azeris had just taken very little territory in the south, and very few Armenian soldiers were killed in the war. The war had just started, been going on for 15 or 18 days or so. When Putin mediated and to stop the war, and Aliyev said, I agree to stop the war on condition that Pashinyan allow Azeri refugees to return to Sushi under Armenian rule. And Pashinyan refused to allow that. Later on, when Putin gave a press conference, he says he was surprised. I couldn't understand why Pashinyan would refuse such a deal to stop the war, because as a result of Pashinyan not agreeing to that suggestion, offer, he kept fighting. We lost thousands more soldiers. We got several thousand more wounded, and we lost 70% of Artsakh. Now, those who make excuses for Pashinyan, that he did this, did that, and he made the right decision, I asked them, what is worse? Is it that if Azeris had occupied very little Azeri territory in the south only, and very few soldiers killed, and in return some Azeri refugees would come to Sushi, and I don't even know what kind of Azeri would dare to come and live under Armenian rule, just like Armenians don't want to live under Azeri rule.
But now he's talking, defending, he's saying the Azerbaijanis have to be there. And as you explained during Putin, he was saying no, he doesn't want that. And now he's saying Azeris were there, they should be there, and all that. I mean, this guy is just amazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, he rejected to have some Azeris live in Sushi under Armenian rule.
Right.
And now Azeris control the whole thing, including Sushi 100% and 70% of Artsakh, and managed to kill thousands of more soldiers. So how can it defend his decision? Again, we come back to the same point. It's the total incompetence and unable to make correct, intelligent decisions, even during peacetime, let alone wartime, where it's even more critical to be on your toes and know what you're doing and have some military knowledge, training. You're the chief of the armed force, commander-in-chief. You give the ultimate orders to stop or not to stop, and then we know that he did agree finally to stop after Azeris took over a lot of territories and Sushi.
Let me run this for a minute while you're reading, just so the people see this. Just one second.
Շուշին նա դժբախտ, դժգույն քաղաք էր, մեզ պետք էր Շուշի։
Ինչ որ կասկած կար, որ Շուշին մերն է։
Այո, կասկած կար, որ մերը չէ։ Ղարաբաղցիք հայ չեն։
Չէ, Ղարաբաղցի են, ո՞րց են հայ։
Այսինքն նրա Ղարաբաղցին ալբանացի է։
Աբա ինչա, կարող ֆրանկ։
Իսկապես
Եվ մենք քեզ սակացնելու ենք, կամ եթե շատ վախեցար, ասա որ վախեցար եւ ես կգամ մենակ։ Պատրելու եմ։
This is the man. He corrupted entire Armenian people. Now they're all publicly saying Karabakh is not Armenian. They are this exact word of Aliyev. They are speaking on behalf of Aliyev, both Pashinyan and his supporters. That's amazing.
I know, man, and this is the man who probably the only leader of a country in the world who campaigned during the June 20 elections, holding a hammer in his hand and threatening to smash the heads of his opponents.
Yeah,
I mean, who does that? The closest I can think of is Saddam Hussein,
yeah,
holding a rifle in his hand. And this guy came to power as a Democrat. And very quickly, he became far from a Democrat. He became a dictator and intolerant.
yeah, even worse. Yeah, he's surrounding himself. Look, the police, every time he goes there, entire parliament, entire government offices get surrounded by police because he's fearful of the people.
Yeah, I mean, this is a man who many of us remember when he first became prime minister. He came to work riding a bicycle.
Yeah, yeah,
There's not even a car, no driver, no bodyguard, no police, nothing, a bicycle. And now he has hundreds of police around him. If he takes one step out of the prime minister's building, hundreds of police are there with shields,
yes,
and their batons bashing the heads of the protesters. And when he travels, there are tons of cars going in front of him, behind him. I jokingly say, even though it's not a joking matter, I say, if you look at the pictures that you're showing, all this military or police officials, there's probably more protecting Pashinyan than at the border protecting Armenia.
yeah. That's what everybody's saying that. You know, but like, let me show you this. Nowadays, when he traveled in Armenia, the entire city they closed. He went to Echmiadzin. There is some school to open. Here is, look at the street of Echmiadzin. They completely blocked. In every corner of the street, there was a policeman wait to control. There's no human being can show up there. This is Armenia now under Pashinyan dictatorship.
And his followers want us to believe that this is a democracy.
Yeah. They don't want to see this. They don't want to even talk about this. The supporter only talk about Kocharian, Sarkisian, you know. They don't want to talk about this idiot because they don't have anything to support their case, you know. Look at that. Cause it's like Erdogan, you know. He's implementing Erdogan policies.
Well, we see this in every dictatorship, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, we see that now in Armenia.
Yeah.
I always say to people who defend Pashinyan and say if he goes, then the former leaders will come. I say, you know, what you're saying is very insulting to all Armenians, because what you're really saying, without knowing what you're saying, that the whole Armenian nation of 20 million Armenians, out of the 20 million, there are only 4 people who can run Armenia, either the one now or the three before him. 4 out of 10 million, only 4 people can run Armenia. My idea is that we're intelligent people. There are many more than 4 people who can run Armenia, and I also question them. I say, suppose one day these 4 people that you're mentioning now die, because someday they will all die. So if those 4 people die, would that mean that forever Armenia will be
Have no leader.
without a leader?
Yeah.
Since there's only 4 people.
Yeah.
Pashinyan and 3 before.
Where is this? Okay, look at this. This woman. This is how he created this cult. This woman, I'm sure you've seen it. He says, "Let them come slaughter us, slaughter my children, my grandchildren, but we still want Pashinyan." Watch.
Yes, իրանք էլ են Փաշինյանին եմ ուզում իրանք թողուրի ինձ մտնի ձերտուն ձեր թորներին մորթի կուզեք Փաշինյանը հա այդքան մի բան եթե թուրքն կա մեզի սաղին մորտա ես իրանք էլ են Փաշինյանին եմ ուզում իրանք թողուրի ինձ մտնի ձերտուն ձեր թորներին մորթի կուզեք Փաշինյանը հա այդքան մի բան
Do you see cult? This is a cult he created.
I mean, this woman, it's very sad to watch any Armenian talk like this. Says, if the Turks occupy Armenia and kill off my grandchildren, I still want Pashinyan.
Yeah.
It's very, very sad.
Yeah.
The next question was a very good question, one of the rare critical questions. And it had several parts. First, the reporter had sent a question that said, Mr. Prime Minister, when before you became Prime Minister, you kept criticizing Ser Sarkisian, saying the president's picture is an own government hanging on the wall of government offices. Yeah. And now we see that you ordered your picture to be hung in all the government offices. Once again, contradicting himself. And let's take them one at a time and explain. So on this one, Pashinyan said, well, I really was talking about the president's picture in the courts and not in the government offices. So now my picture is in government offices. It's probably already also in the courts. That's also a government office. The next critical question was about appointing incompetent people to, such as the Armenia envoy for the Turkey negotiations, and many others, incompetent appointments. And we covered this. He said, well, these people are from my party. They're more important to be party members than competent people. Again, contradiction. And then the reporter surprisingly dared to ask, and the lady who was reading the questions dared to read this question. He said, before you became prime minister, you accused the former regimes of appointing their relatives, their friends, their cousins, acquaintances to high-ranking positions. Now we see that all of your relatives and your wife's relatives and your other officials' relatives, they all are enjoying high-ranking officials. You're doing exactly what you criticize them for. And I don't remember what he said, but I think this is where he said, well, because there was also a question about all these relatives are winning multi-million-dollar government contracts, and some of them without an auction, without a bid. They were just outright, which violates Armenian law. They were just giving in, announcing the winner on basis of a single bid.
We have 5 minutes.
Okay, and Pashinyan said, yeah, well, we have so much work that we don't have enough companies, so we give it to a lot of these people, and some of the bids are even given to companies owned by opposition. There was also a question about the recent purchase of a $200,000 brand new BMW for Alan Simonian, the Speaker of Parliament. And of course, Pashinyan came up with the excuse that we've heard before, that the government officials' cars are old, they're breaking down, and they're spending a lot of money on repairs. And now if they buy a $200,000 BMW, they don't spend money on repairs. I'm sure that any car that's broken down, you can repair with much less than $200,000, so it doesn't break down again.
Yeah.
So all this, and then he added one more. He says, "Let me add one more accusation against myself." he said when I became prime minister, I said that all the universities, the board of trustees should not be party members, should be independent, and yet he appointed Babigian, the head of his political party, to be the chairman of the board of trustees of, I think, Yerevan State University, or one of the universities. And he said, and again he came up with the strangest explanation for doing that, which is a complete contradiction of what he said he would do. He said a lot of the members of the board of the universities were secretly hidden party members and belonging to unknown parties. That's why we took over from them. I mean, it's completely craziness. We're almost done since we're running out of time. I spoke about the mayor. And the last point I want to make about the mayor, and I'll stop with this. Since he said that he had to replace the mayor, recall the mayor because he had left the party. But if I was there, I would have immediately said, Mr. Prime Minister, this mayor resigned from the party over a year ago. If that was the criteria for getting rid of him, why didn't you get rid of him a year ago when he resigned?
Yeah.
How come a year later, all of a sudden you realize that he left the party and then decide to change him? And as I said earlier, he changed it with another non-party member after making a case why it should be a party member.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop here.
Well,
Hours.
thank you very much for coming, and thanks for your input. Yeah, this is the man. He came, and we all said, this was angel came down and all this corrupt government, but he turned up the mother of all corrupt, and he destroyed the country, and nobody knows what's going to happen. But we're working on some project in New Year. We will be launching, but we'll wait for that announcement. And again, thank you for watching, and follow us and share this stuff with your friends. Let's expose Pashinyan to the maximum possible. I consider him an enemy within. And this is the problem. Armenia is in big difficulty because when you have external enemies, it's very much easier to fight. But when you have enemies within, it's very difficult. So again, I thank you, Mr. Sassounian, for coming. We'll see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.